I have a piece of the watercolor paper that we painted, and I am going to show you how to tear this with the metal ruler. A good suggestion is to have a good handful of it so that you can grab onto it and pull really hard while holding down pretty firmly on the ruler. And you will get a straight, although it will have a bit of a textured edge to it. But if you want to use this in a more graphic way, a straight edge is the way to go with either a ruler or cutting it with a scissor. I've also torn paper because I have an idea about what I'm going to do on my journal page. As I've been working, ideas have been coming to me from the materials themselves. Now this piece was torn from the back side so that the edges, there's kind of rough edges on the back side that are where the paper splits apart, are not visible on the front. I'm going to show you what happens if I tear the colored side up. You end up with white lines from the inside of the paper, like that. And that can be very appealing if you want to use it as a landscape element or want to paint another layer of watercolor or just color it in with some markers, and it will give you that texture. But if as I want in this case to not see any of those white lines and only have the rough edge cut, I tore it from the reverse side. I'm going to take a piece of regular printer paper where I've printed some photographs and show you how much more easily it is to tear a thinner paper. And as I was working with these photographs, I noticed that there was one that caught my attention, and I thought, since I have no real idea in mind when I start working on a page, I would just use the photograph as a story starter. And so, do this way. So I'm going to put this aside and open up the journal, which has been gessoed on both the left and right side of the page. And with that, I can use both sides as one big spread, or I can just work on the right hand or the left hand side. And I've given this 2 coats of gesso, and it's dry. One other suggestion I could make is that I have often gessoed several pages at a time as time permits, so that I have a few pages to mess around with for the next time I want to get into working on something. Okay, but we're going to go back to this page and clamp it down. I should mention you could also use bulldog clips for this task, because some of you don't have the bigger clips and they will work just as fine. You might want to use the larger ones though. So I am going to wet the paper with some more gesso, just so that I have some damp acrylic to glue my paper down with. And I am going to take the brush. The brush is here. And I'm going to spread the gesso out up top, because when I was thinking about the photo that I chose, which is a summer cabin from when I was young, and I thought it would be appropriate to have some blue sky behind it, sort of happy memories. So I'm going to just stick that down. Could also clamp the paper down so it really gets a good stick. And if you're not satisfied with that amount of stick, we're just going to be applying things over on top of other things. You're more than welcome to use some glue. Now I'm going to put some gesso there, and I am going to glue down the photo. I'm actually going to tear with my hands and not with the ruler to get these borders off, because I want it to be a more intimate kind of nook in the collage That's a personal preference, but not to look so much like a photo album where you have those edges remaining. And I'm just going to stick that on the paper. Now, one of the things I often do, and it's not uncommon, and it makes the book more interesting, I think, is to go over the edge of the paper with something of a larger scale. It's almost like a tab, but I could also use it as a fold-in and possibly write a little text on here if I want. What I'm doing is just rubbing in some of the gesso into the background of the sky. It's also an old photo, so it doesn't need to be perfectly crisp. It can have sort of a dreamy, ethereal quality to it. And while I was messing around with this, I thought, you're away from home and maybe you want to send a postcard. And I thought putting a nice stamp in there was kind of an element that might work. And I'm going to just randomly stick it right in the middle. We also found some Coca-Cola. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Coca-Cola tear out from the magazine I had shown you before, and I thought that has a really nice nostalgic quality, so I am going to include this on this page as well. Now, what I'm doing, it's typical of the way I work. I work a lot in landscape. In fact, I say quite often that everything is a landscape to me. I just always tend to have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. This is a more objective, realistic approach than just a purely abstract approach. But I might add something vertical just for interest. So I'm going to use this piece of cutout from the magazine as a bit of a background on the sky, the top of a lighthouse, like it's a sea vacation, and I'm just making this up as I go along. And so maybe I'll put this here. And kind of do it. I guess I'll line it up with the sky pretty much, pushing it up. Now, if I didn't want to have all this white going on, I could use a matte medium, which is clear, and often go over and seal everything with matte medium. So that's another way to go. And we're going to just let this dry for now and come back to it. While this was drying, I took a piece of saran wrap and put it between the two pages so they don't stick together, but I am able to close the book and put something heavy on it so that the papers that are on the page will stick better. I also wanted to show you the packaging for the gel matte medium, which is in this case made by Liquitex. It is the clear sealer, or it can be used as glue as well. And it isn't on the list, but I'm mentioning it in case you're interested in getting some. When the pages have dried, I open the book back up and notice that there were some smudges of the gesso around the watercolor paper and the photograph, and I wanted to clean it off somewhat. So I took a damp brush, not very much water on it, and scrubbed. And I can remove some of that, blending it in, but I can also make a picture more muted by just smoothing it over and letting it kind of fade into the background a little bit. What I thought I would do with this after, well, it isn't wet anymore, is use a marker and trace the outline and make this more of a sort of a drawn element rather than having it be another photograph. I wanted you to have a look at what I have been doing off camera to add to this 2-page spread that I was working on in the last part of the video. First thing I did was paste down this word, which was going down in the video, and I abraded it by adding water and scrubbing a little bit to make it look more worn, more vintage maybe. I added the fine line marker to the lighthouse to give it a more drawn effect. I also noticed some shapes in the smudges that were here, and I painted over them with some green watercolor and then enhanced it with some of my watercolor brushes to give it a little more detail. And then I decided to also outline it with the fine line marker so that it's kind of a more cohesive page-to-page association. Now I've added a key, which I stitched on in a couple of places, and put the yo-yo. I just glued the yo-yo down. That may have been there already. There's still room around here to come back and do some other things, but for now I'm going to leave it as is, and if I get any more ideas I might revisit it. So I will see you in the next video.